All right, so a little bit more on absolute value. We've talked already, absolute value, definition, the distance from zero. And Mr. Darnall reminding you, always positive, right? Because you can't travel negative distance. But we're going to look at comparing absolute value. Sometimes when you start trying to throw in comparison words, fewer, less, greater, more than, and you're talking absolute value and you're talking negative numbers, and it gets a little confusing sometimes because things start to seem backwards, I guess you could say. So we're going to start looking at comparing absolute value. All right, so let's just take a scenario here. All right, Mr. Anderson scored negative 10 points on his turn at a trivia game. Not good, Mr. Anderson. Not good. All right, Mr. Anderson scored negative 10 points on his turn at a trivia game. In Mr. Darnall's turn, he scored more points than Mr. Anderson. Now, notice what it said there. I scored more points. Okay? Now, I didn't score more into the negative. Okay? I scored more, which means I have a better score than Mr. Anderson. And he scored more points than Mr. Anderson. Use absolute value to describe Mr. Darnall's score as a loss. So maybe I still lost a few points, but I didn't lose as many as Mr. Anderson. Not good, Mr. Anderson. Not good. All right, so let's talk about this. In this situation, the absolute value of negative 10, because that's what we're referring to. I'm going to just insert a little number line in here. Okay, so Mr. Anderson is somewhere over here at negative 10, right? I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me get a different color here. He's somewhere over here at negative 10. I, on the other hand, while it says that I have a loss, I scored more points than him. So I am somewhere in this section here. Okay, I'm somewhere in that section there. All right, so in this situation, the absolute value of negative 10 represents a loss of, so how many points did Mr. Anderson lose? Well, he scored negative 10, so he lost 10 points. Mr. Darnall lost, did I lose more points than Mr. Anderson or less points than Mr. Anderson? Okay, now, I know I scored more points. This is where it gets confusing because you see this word more, but look at the context of the sentence. Keyword lost. Did I lose more points or did I lose less points? Well, I lost less, or I lost fewer than 10 points. Okay, less than 10 points, I could say less than 10 points, or I could use the word fewer than 10 points. I didn't lose 10 points. I got close, but I didn't lose 10 points. I lost fewer than, because I'm in this category here. I scored more points than Mr. Anderson. I unfortunately still had a loss on the trivia game. Not good, Mr. Darnall, right? Should have done better than that. But I did better than the other person. I didn't lose as many, so I lost fewer points. And I know that it can be a little confusing when you're looking at the fact that, wait a second, here I have the word more, and here I'm using the word fewer. But notice that we changed how we were comparing it. We're saying, well, if I was talking about losing, how many points? So that's why, a number line kind of gives us that visualization. We're back to visualize it. And never be scared to draw a picture in math to help you visualize it, even if it's a number line, or literally actually drawing it out. All right, if you want to start drawing out little tokens or something for points and things like that, something so you can see the picture of what's going on and put it on the paper. Okay, some of your best math students draw pictures to help them visualize what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people are scared and think that means that they don't understand it or they don't want to take the extra time. But if you can take an extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and it helps you understand it, it's worth it, right? All right, so don't be scared to draw a picture. All right, the low temperature on Friday was -8 degrees Fahrenheit. The low temperature the low temperature on Saturday was colder. So let's go ahead and start thinking about what that means. Okay, Friday, -8 degrees Fahrenheit. On Saturday, it got colder. Use absolute value to describe the temperature on Saturday as a temperature below zero. So I'm going to go ahead, insert number line. Friday, -8. Colder. So that means I got farther away from zero. I'm farther below zero. It could be -9, -10, 11, -12. Any of those. It doesn't specify, but we know that it's colder. Okay. The temperature on Saturday was it more than 8 degrees below zero or less than 8 degrees below zero? Now, think about what that means. Less than 8 degrees below zero is any of these numbers here. -7 is less below zero. It's a bigger number, but it's less below zero. And I know that's really confusing to some people sometimes. Okay? Think about that for a second. I've got -8. That was my temperature on Friday. -7 is a bigger number because it's to the right on the number line. But it is less below zero. Okay? So we have to really start thinking about the context of the sentence and how we're using those words. So the temperature on Saturday, was it less than 8 degrees below zero? Was I here? Or was the temperature on Saturday down here? Well, it already said it was colder, and colder is going to put me down here. So it was more than 8 degrees below zero. And I know, again, we're thinking, wait a second, Mr. Darnall. Here you're saying more. Here you're talking colder. More should be greater. Greater to the right. Okay? Draw pictures. Stop and think. Look at the context of the words. What is it actually asking you to do here? Okay? And draw a picture. Okay? It helps me to draw pictures. Right? I teach this stuff, but it helps me to stop and visualize it just for a second, because sometimes it can get a little confusing. All right, so let's just compare some absolute values here. Right? Now, remember, absolute value, always positive. Well, here is -15. But notice there are no absolute value signs. So the value of this is still -15. This says the absolute value of -15. Absolute value is always positive, so that value is actually 15. Now I have to decide, is -15 less than or greater than? And -15 is to the left of 0, 15 is to the right of 0, so this is less than. -15 is less than the absolute value of -15. Okay, notice how I'm rewriting the values above so I can, again, visualize what I'm talking about here. So 3, there's no absolute value signs there, so I'm just talking about the number 3. The absolute value of -5, well, absolute value is always positive, so that's really 5. So is 3 less than 5 or is 3 greater than 5? 3 is less than 5. The absolute value of -13 is 13. The absolute value of -14 is 14. Is 13 less than 14 or is 13 greater than 14? And it's less than. Apparently all of these are less than. Okay, scoot that so you can see. Okay, 40, no absolute value signs, and the absolute value of 40. Remember, absolute value, always positive, so that's still 40. Well, wait a second, 40, is that less than 40, greater than 40, or those two are equal, aren't they? And then last, the absolute value of -10 is 10. The absolute value of 10 is also 10. So these two are also equal. Okay? It helps to write those things out above it just for the visualization, just to give you a little help. One last scenario. During a game, Johnny lost fewer than 5 points. Use an integer to describe his possible points. Now, lost fewer than 5 points. So let's think about what that's saying here. Okay, put it in our minds. Lost fewer than 5 points. If he lost 6 points, is that fewer than 5? No. Now let's put integers to this as well. Lost tells me that I'm in negative. I'm talking negative integers here. So guess what I'm going to do? Yep, that's right. Draw a number line. I'm going to visualize what's going on here. He lost this, so I'm going to put this at, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, -5, okay? He lost fewer than 5 points. So we know it's a loss, so he's somewhere less than 0, but he has to be greater than -5. So he is somewhere in this piece here, somewhere between there. Use an integer to describe his possible points. Well, could he have scored -5 points? No, it said lost fewer than 5. Could he have scored -6? Again, no, it said fewer. So we're going to be heading this direction. Could he have scored -4 points? Was that fewer than -5? Yeah. Okay, or fewer than 5. So he could have had -4 points. If he lost 3 points, is that fewer than 5? Sure. Well, that's -3. If he lost 2 points, is that fewer than 5? Absolutely. So -2. If he lost 1 point, is that fewer than -5? It is. What if he lost no points? Well, that's fewer than 5, but since we know he lost points, then 0, if he was at 0, then he didn't lose any points. So that's not possible. So here is our possible point values for Johnny during this game. Okay? Thinking absolute value, thinking its distance, but also thinking in the comparison of these integers and how all this works together. I encourage you, use those number lines, use those visualizations, draw those pictures, take the time to read the sentence, think about the vocabulary words, think about the keywords before you just throw something on paper. Okay? Make sure you know what it's talking about before you throw something down. Okay? Because sometimes our brains try to trick us in absolute value and integers and negatives and positives and rational numbers. It can get a little confusing sometimes. We want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what's going on here.